It was a chilly March morning in Manhattan, when the silence of a modest apartment building was shattered by the wail of sirens. Neighbors peered through cracked doors as police officers rushed up the narrow stairwell, their faces grim, their voices urgent. Inside apartment 4B, a scene of heartbreak and horror awaited. A young woman, barely 19, lay motionless on the floor, her dreams and future extinguished in an instant. The room was a jarring mix of everyday life and sudden tragedy. Textbooks scattered across the desk, a half-finished cup of tea cooling on the nightstand, and a cell phone buzzing with unanswered calls from a mother thousands of miles away. Detectives moved quietly, piecing together the fragments of a life that, just days before, brimmed with hope and promise. Who was she? How did a bright, ambitious student from India end up alone and lifeless in a city that was supposed to be her gateway to a better future? As the news spread, shockwaves rippled through the community. Friends, classmates, and family left reeling, desperate for answers. What secrets had she carried? What dangers had she faced? And most haunting of all, how could a promising life unravel so quickly, so tragically? The truth, as investigators would soon discover, was far more complicated and far more chilling than anyone could have imagined. Her name was Ananya Sharma, and to those who knew her, in the bustling city of Pune, India, she was the embodiment of hope and possibility. The eldest daughter in a close-knit family, Ananya grew up in a modest apartment filled with laughter, the aroma of her mother's cooking, and the constant hum of ambition. Her father, a schoolteacher, and her mother, a homemaker, poured every ounce of their love and savings into her education, believing that their sacrifices would one day open doors to a brighter world. From a young age, Ananya was a dreamer. She devoured books, excelled in her studies, and spent long evenings at her desk, her head bent over English essays and science projects. Her teachers described her as curious and determined, a girl who never shied away from hard work. But it was her gentle spirit and infectious optimism that truly set her apart. She was the friend who stayed late to help with homework, the daughter who never forgot to call home, the sister who promised to make her family proud. When Ananya received her acceptance letter from a prestigious New York university, it felt like the culmination of years of hope and perseverance. Her family celebrated with sweets and prayers, neighbors stopping by to offer blessings and advice. For Ananya, the opportunity was more than just an academic achievement, it was a chance to rewrite her family's story, to prove that a girl from a small Indian city could make it in the world's greatest metropolis. Yet beneath the excitement, there was a quiet undercurrent of fear. New York was a world away from everything she knew, its streets unfamiliar, its culture daunting. Her parents worried about her safety, about the loneliness that might creep in when the city lights faded. But Ananya reassured them with her trademark smile, promising to stay focused, to be careful, to chase her dreams with both feet on the ground. No one could have imagined that the very qualities that made her so special, her innocence, her trust, her boundless hope, would one day lead her into the shadows. As Ananya packed her bags and boarded her flight, she carried with her not just the weight of her family's expectations, but the fragile promise of a future that, tragically, would never come to pass. Ananya's first glimpse of New York was a blur of neon lights and endless motion, the city's energy pulsing through the windows of her yellow cab as it sped toward her new home. She pressed her forehead to the glass, wide-eyed and breathless, marveling at the skyscrapers that seemed to touch the clouds. Everything felt possible here, every street corner a promise, every stranger a potential friend. For a moment, the loneliness of leaving home was drowned out by the thrill of adventure. But as the days passed, the city's vastness began to close in. The university campus, so lively and crowded, often felt like a maze where she wandered unseen. Her classmates moved in tight circles, their laughter echoing in languages she barely understood. She missed the warmth of her mother's embrace, the comfort of familiar faces, the easy rhythm of home. Evenings in her tiny dorm room stretched endlessly, the silence broken only by the distant wail of sirens and the soft ping of messages from India. Ananya tried to fill the emptiness with study groups and campus events, but the connections she craved always seemed just out of reach. She scrolled through social media, watching friends back home gather for festivals and family dinners, their lives moving forward without her. The city that once felt so full of promise now seemed indifferent, its crowds a reminder of how truly alone she was. Vulnerable and longing for belonging, Ananya found herself searching for a place to fit in, a friendly face, a kind word, anything to make the loneliness fade. In her quest for connection, she would soon cross paths with someone who promised everything she was missing, but at a cost she could never have imagined. It started innocently enough, an overheard conversation in the campus cafe. A whispered joke between classmates about sugar daddies and easy money. At first, Ananya dismissed it as something that happened to other girls, not someone like her. But as the weeks wore on and her savings dwindled, the idea began to linger in the back of her mind. Rent was high, textbooks were expensive, and her family's sacrifices weighed heavily on her conscience. She wanted to ease their burden, to prove she could thrive on her own. One evening, while scrolling through her phone in the quiet of her dorm room, Ananya stumbled upon an ad for a mentorship website promising generous allowances and glamorous experiences. The profiles were filled with smiling, well-dressed women dining in upscale restaurants, traveling to exotic destinations, living lives that seemed worlds away from her own. The temptation was undeniable, a chance to escape her loneliness, to taste the luxury she saw all around her but could never afford. Curiosity turned to intrigue as she read stories of students who found not just financial support, but companionship and guidance. The risks seemed distant, almost unreal, compared to the immediate allure of comfort and connection. Ananya hesitated, torn between her values and her needs, but the promise of a better life was hard to resist. What she didn't realize was that behind the polished profiles and promises of safety, a far more dangerous reality was waiting, one that would test her trust, her judgment, and ultimately, her fate. His name was Daniel, and from the very first message, he seemed different from the others. His profile was polished and understated, no flashy cars or wild promises. Just a few photos of a distinguished man in his early 40s. A gentle smile, and a bio that spoke of art, travel, and a desire for meaningful connection. When he reached out to Ananya, his words were warm and respectful, never crossing the line into anything that made her uncomfortable. He asked about her studies, her dreams, her family back home. He listened, really listened, in a way that made her feel seen in a city that so often made her invisible. Their first meeting was in a quiet cafe near Central Park. Daniel arrived with a bouquet of lilies, her favorite, though she'd never told him, and a reassuring calm that put her at ease. He was attentive, asking about her classes and her adjustment to life in New York, sharing stories of his own struggles as a young immigrant decades before. He spoke of his business successes, his travels, and the loneliness that sometimes crept in despite all his achievements. Ananya found herself opening up, drawn to his confidence and kindness, grateful for the attention and understanding she so desperately missed. Over the weeks, Daniel became a steady presence in her life. He sent thoughtful messages before exams, treated her to dinners at restaurants she'd only seen in magazines, and slipped crisp bills into her purse with a gentle insistence that she take care of herself. He never pressured her, never made her feel cheap or ashamed. Instead, he painted their arrangement as a partnership, one where both could find comfort and companionship in a world that often felt cold. Ananya's friends warned her to be careful, but she brushed off their concerns. Daniel was different, she insisted. He respected her boundaries, made her laugh, and seemed genuinely invested in her happiness. With every gift, every kind word, every promise of protection, her trust in him deepened. What she didn't see was the subtle shift beneath the surface, the way his affection was slowly binding her to him, blurring the line between prince and predator, and drawing her ever closer to a danger she could not yet imagine. At first, the changes were so subtle that Ananya barely noticed them. Daniel began texting more frequently, wanting to know where she was and who she was with. He insisted on picking her up after classes, saying it was for her safety, and grew quiet whenever she mentioned spending time with friends. When she laughed off his possessiveness, he would apologize, blaming his protectiveness on past heartbreaks and the dangers of the city. Ananya wanted to believe him after all. He had always been so caring, so generous. But soon, his requests became demands. He asked her to keep their relationship a secret, warning that others wouldn't understand. He discouraged her from sharing details with her friends, suggesting that jealousy and gossip would only bring trouble. When she hesitated, he showered her with gifts and reassurances, making her feel guilty for doubting his intentions. Ananya told herself that he was just looking out for her, that his jealousy was a sign of how much he cared. Still, a quiet unease began to grow inside her. She missed the easy laughter of her old friendships, the freedom of making her own choices. Yet every time she tried to pull away, Daniel would sense it, drawing her back in with promises and apologies. Ananya clung to the hope that things would get better, that the man she trusted would never truly hurt her. But beneath the surface, the warning signs were multiplying, and what she didn't know was that the real danger was only just beginning. Ananya's world slowly split in two. By day, she was the diligent student, attending lectures, sharing polite smiles with classmates, and sending cheerful updates to her family back in India. But beneath the surface, she was carrying a secret that grew heavier with each passing week. She found herself dodging questions from friends, inventing excuses for missed gatherings, and deleting messages from Daniel before anyone could see. The lies came easily at first, but soon they tangled around her, making every conversation feel like a test. Her family's video calls became bittersweet rituals. She'd force a smile, hiding the exhaustion in her eyes, assuring her parents that everything was fine. Yet, the guilt gnawed at her. She longed to confide in someone, to share the confusion and fear that had crept into her life, but the risk felt too great. What if her friends judged her? What if her family's trust shattered? The isolation deepened, and with it, a constant anxiety. She felt trapped between two worlds, unable to fully belong to either. The secrecy that once seemed like a small price to pay for comfort and companionship now felt suffocating. Ananya's heart ached for the simplicity of her old life, but she couldn't find her way back. The emotional toll of living a double life was mounting, and she was more alone than ever. The shift in Daniel's demeanor was gradual, but unmistakable. What once felt like caring attention now pressed down on Ananya like a weight she couldn't shake. He began showing up unannounced outside her classes, waiting in his car with a forced smile that never quite reached his eyes. If she was late to respond to his messages, he would bombard her with calls, his tone growing sharp and accusatory. "Why are you ignoring me?" he'd demand, his words laced with suspicion. "Who are you with?" Ananya tried to reassure him, but nothing seemed to ease his growing paranoia. He started questioning her every move, insisting she'll share her location at all times. When she hesitated, he accused her of hiding things, of being ungrateful for everything he'd done. The gifts and dinners that once felt special now seemed like chains, reminders of a debt she could never repay. He even threatened to contact her family if she ever tried to leave him, hinting at secrets he could reveal that would ruin her reputation and break her parents' hearts. The fear crept in slowly. Then all at once, Ananya found herself glancing over her shoulder, dreading the sight of Daniel's car parked outside her building. He began monitoring her social media, questioning every new friend or comment, demanding explanations for things she hadn't even noticed. The city that once felt so full of promise now seemed to close in around her, every shadow a potential threat. Sleep became elusive. Her dreams haunted by the feeling of being watched, of never being truly alone. She tried to reach out to friends, but the words caught in her throat. How could she explain the mess she was in? The tension in her life was now constant, her fear growing with every passing day. Ananya was trapped, her world shrinking as Daniel's grip tightened. And she began to realize that the danger she once thought she could control was now far beyond her reach. It was a Friday evening. The city outside, alive with laughter and lights. But inside Ananya's apartment, the air was thick with dread. Daniel had insisted on coming over, his voice on the phone clipped and cold. Ananya's hands trembled as she tidied the living room, her mind racing with rehearsed explanations and desperate hopes that tonight would be different. When the knock finally came, it was sharp, impatient, a warning in itself. Daniel entered with a storm behind his eyes. He barely glanced at her before launching into accusations, his words tumbling over each other in a torrent of jealousy and rage. He waved her phone in the air, demanding to know who she'd been texting, why she hadn't answered his calls. Ananya tried to explain, her voice shaking, but he cut her off, his anger growing louder, more menacing. The walls seemed to close in, the room shrinking with every step he took toward her. She pleaded for him to calm down, to listen, but Daniel's face twisted with betrayal. He accused her of lying, of using him, of making a fool of him. The argument escalated, voices echoing off the bare walls, fear rising in Ananya's chest like a tide she couldn't hold back. She tried to move away, but he blocked her path, his presence overwhelming, suffocating. In a final, desperate attempt to escape, Ananya reached for her phone. But Daniel's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with bruising force. The struggle was brief, chaotic, a blur of panic, shouted words, and shattered trust. In a moment that seemed to stretch forever, violence erupted, sudden and irreversible. When the chaos finally stilled, Ananya lay motionless, her dreams and future stolen in a single, tragic instant. The city outside continued on, unaware of the life that had just been lost. The promise extinguished behind closed doors. The morning after, the apartment building was swarmed with flashing lights and the low hum of police radios. Detectives moved, methodically, collecting evidence, while neighbors whispered in shock, piecing together rumors and fragments of the night before. News vans soon lined the street. Reporters eager to broadcast the tragedy of a young international student whose life had ended so violently, so far from home. Headlines splashed her name and photo across screens, speculating about her secret life, her choices, and the man who had taken everything from her. But while the city buzzed with scandal and curiosity, Ananya's family in Pune was plunged into a silence so deep it felt suffocating. The call from the consulate shattered their world, her mother's cries echoing through the small apartment, her father's hands shaking as he tried to make sense of the words. Friends and relatives gathered, offering comfort that could never fill the void. The public dissected Ananya's story, but her family mourned the daughter they had loved and lost, their grief private and raw. In the glare of the media spotlight, the true cost of her tragedy was felt most deeply in the quiet moments, an empty chair at the dinner table, a phone that would never ring again. The investigation moved swiftly, propelled by the media attention and the outcry from both sides of the world. Detectives pieced together the timeline, gathering messages, security footage, and witness statements. Daniel was arrested within days, his calm demeanor at the police station a chilling contrast to the violence he had unleashed. The case made headlines in both New York and India. sparking debates about the vulnerability of international students and the hidden dangers they face. For Ananya's family, the pursuit of justice was a maze of unfamiliar laws and distant courtrooms. They struggled to understand the American legal system, relying on translators and advocates to keep them informed. The trial was a blur of testimony and evidence, each detail reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. The distance made everything harder, every update filtered through official channels, every decision feeling out of their hands. Yet, they clung to the hope that the truth would prevail. That their daughter's story would not be reduced to a headline or a cautionary tale. The search for justice was long and painful. A journey marked by frustration, heartbreak, and the unwavering love of a family determined to honor Ananya's memory. Ananya's story is not an isolated tragedy, it is part of a growing, hidden epidemic affecting young women around the world. Experts warn that love scams and secret relationships, especially those forged online, are on the rise, preying on vulnerability and loneliness. According to recent studies, thousands of international students fall victim to financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, or even violence each year. Many are drawn in by promises of support and companionship, only to find themselves trapped in cycles of secrecy and control. Psychologists emphasize that the shame and fear of judgment often keep victims silent, making it harder for them to seek help. As technology blurs the boundaries between safety and risk, the need for awareness and open conversation has never been greater. Ananya's fate is a stark reminder that behind every glamorous promise, there can be real and devastating danger. Ananya's story leaves behind a legacy of heartbreak, but also a call for vigilance and compassion. Her life, full of promise and innocence, was cut short by choices made in isolation and fear, choices that so many young women, far from home, are forced to navigate alone. The pain her family endures is a reminder that behind every headline is a real person. A web of dreams and relationships forever changed. Yet, from tragedy, there is a chance to learn and protect others. For those living far from loved ones, it's vital to stay connected. To reach out for help without shame, and to trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Families and friends must foster open conversations, free from judgment, so that secrets don't become prisons. Institutions and communities can do more to educate and support vulnerable students, ensuring no one feels invisible or alone. Ananya's memory urges us to look out for one another, to speak up, and to break the silence around hidden dangers. Her story is a warning, but also a hope that by sharing, listening, and caring, we can prevent another life from being lost to the shadows. Let her legacy be one of awareness, courage, and the promise of a safer tomorrow.